Last night we talked about these polls. News poll, obviously, Resolve. I think we're all agreed now they're in trend. You and I often talk about the fact that the government now for 6 months has really settled into a position where at the next election, unless things change, they're in minority government. David Crowe in the Sydney Morning Herald today has a good look at all of that. He looks at the issues where the coalition's ahead. The economy, I think we both agree that's front and centre in the campaign, national security, immigration, detainees. And he says that Dutton's gained ground, even though he hasn't really got an answer for any of these things yet, but he's made ground up on the government. And he said, you would be wrong to dismiss this trend if you are Labor. So this budget is incredibly important. Do you think there are alarm bells ringing inside Labor?
No, I don't, in terms of the budget. So I think I think Jim Chalmers wants his surplus. And he's got an economic argument on that. You could say it's deflationary, but you have to wonder how much of the ghost of Wayne Swan is about that, because to most Australians give a stuff about a surplus. And the other argument, of course, that we hear is, well, if you put too much assistance in, then you can fuel inflation. But you could look at something like petrol excise. There are things that you can look at, Peter. And so I think this is a dangerous period for the government, no question about it. I mean, it would be difficult to see the government in a good position in the polls when we've had whatever we've had, 12 rate rises, and we've had rents go up astronomically. But one lever they have, which they haven't yet, which they're promising to tackle on that front and haven't yet, is immigration. We know that. We've discussed that before. So it'd be very interesting to see what they do on that in the next 6 months, because that really feeds into why housing costs, which is one of the worst ways the cost of living is going up. I don't see anything in this budget that will be a headline in terms of cost of living assistance unless Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese change their mind in the next 2 weeks. My understanding is the plan is to sell the stage 3 tax cuts, which we've known about the way they were rejigged since January. So I think the budget will go down like a lead balloon. Having said that, there's a long way to go. Will there be rate cuts? Well, there's concerns on that front for the government that they won't happen later this year. I think the opposition is not in an election-winning position either. And I think where we are at the moment is, as you say, a minority government, but I still think it's possible for Labor to sneak into majority. But unquestionably, it is looking at the moment like a good result for independents and perhaps the Greens. Well,
just on that,
and that spells trouble for both major parties, and that's when they're not happy. The voters aren't happy with either alternative.
Look, I agree with that in part. In part, depends where some of those minor parties on the right sit in particular seats. But David Pocock, Jacqui Lambie, you talk about crossbench independents. They were out there today. They want changes to negative gearing. They say they want people to only be able to own one investment property. They want to go after the capital gains tax discount people have when they sell a home. Now, they're influential. Labor needs them 9 times out of 10 to pass legislation. This cost Bill Shorten the unlosable election in 2019. Jacqui Lambie says, look, people don't care about negative gearing anymore. What do you think?
Well, they definitely do care about negative gearing, and polling shows they don't want it altered. But I must say, Peter, I've long been of the view that if there is one way you could alter it, it's to allow people to have one property negatively geared, but not more. And in that sense, you're helping mum and dad investors, you're helping young people who can't afford to live in the area they want, so they buy something out in the bush or whatever, and at least get some wealth that way, rather than not allowing them to have negative gearing. But I don't think the government will go there. I understand what you're saying. They need those numbers in the Senate, but they are pretty polling driven, as all these guys are, and that polling shows it's poison to touch it, even if Jim Chalmers might privately want to.
We'll see. Andrew, thank you as always.